Andrew Snelling is a geologist who has studied granite formation in many parts of the world, and he takes up the story.
Well, incredibly as it may seem, in the last 2 decades there's been a revolution in thinking about granites. Because for many years there's been a consistent problem that's gnawed away in the thinking of, in the background, in the thinking of geologists. And it's best summed up in the term the space problem. Remember, we've got this hot molten blob, this diapir, this whole balloon of molten material that supposedly has melted deep in the Earth's crust over millions of years. It's got to somehow rise in the Earth's crust, but you've got all this other rock above that is pushing down on it. How is this big balloon going to rise and push aside all that rock? That's what became known as the space problem. So it's led to new investigations and new thinking about how these granite bodies form.
Geologists began to suspect that granite magmas had risen very rapidly through the Earth's crust along narrow fractures, a process up to 1 million times faster than the slow rise of magmas in balloon-shaped diapirs.
And then they've realised that there are ways in which granite would have formed, the molten material would have formed at depth in little batches that accumulated in fractures, and pressure on those fractures would squeeze the magma up through cracks. They're thinking in terms of small batches of molten granite accumulating very rapidly, getting into these fractures, and then the fractures closing and the molten material being pumped up through that fracture through what we call a dike. A large vertical fracture on which there is a channel for the molten material to come up. And they're thinking now in terms, instead of tens or hundreds of thousands of years for the molten material to rise and accumulate in the upper crust, say 2 to 3 miles down, they're talking about 6, 10, 20 years at most for some of these bodies to accumulate.